Today we are in Pasadena, California to meet Firas Abuzaid. He's a colleague of mine. He was a CTO. He's currently the CTO of Neo.Tax, a tax startup that is working to use AI to automate business taxes. He has a really interesting background where he's super smart. He went to schools like, it was MIT, Harvard. He's definitely got his PhD at Stanford in machine learning. But anyway, being a co-founder is his first job, first official job. He did intern, I think, at Facebook. But anyway, we're going to hear his story today. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen him in a few years, so hope you enjoy. I think we're good here. Yeah, the mic's set up. Okay, great. So, yeah, I mean, my friend Firas. Hi. You have the same wave.
I feel obligated. I can't help it.
So we haven't seen each other in like 2 years, but yeah. Anyway, the last time we spoke was when I was in Korea and we were talking just over the phone.
Right.
And I remember, I think what I asked you was that's right around when ChatGPT came out. And then I was like, dude, how are you guys using this at Neo.Tax? And by the way, Neo.Tax,
basically, we're an AI startup that automates taxes for businesses in the United States.
Yeah. So I remember I was talking about AI, and I was like, hey, Firas, how is it impacting you? And what I remember you saying is you were saying we started to use, we got access to GPT-4.
Yeah.
And we were starting to use it. Like, we were using it and we're seeing some promising results.
Yeah.
And the other part that you said that was interesting was you said, I don't think that we're going to hire junior engineers
anymore. Yeah.
So that's what I remember, and I was kind of blown away when you said that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why is because now, with the rise of ChatGPT, but also tools like GitHub Copilot, Cursor, which is this new IDE that I think kind of blows GitHub Copilot.
IDE is a program that coders use to code.
Yeah. So basically, because of the rise of GitHub Copilot, Cursor, ChatGPT, Claude AI, all these AI coding assistants, and I really recommend Cursor. I think it blows Copilot out of the water.
Too.
Yeah. I mean, most of the boilerplate code that a junior software engineer would write can be generated by Cursor. I'm not saying that it's a complete replacement for it, but it definitely is fairly competitive with it, right? And by the way, we pay for Cursor subscription for all of our engineers at Neo.Tax and our data scientists because it really supercharges them, you know? And they've done a really smart job about building it in an ergonomic way so that it's very easy to just get right into it and start using it with your existing code base. It feels almost seamless. I think the way I think about it is that if I was going to hire someone junior, that person has to be really, really high slope and can use the AI, him or herself, to supercharge their own workflows.
That is super interesting.
Yeah.
Because I was just talking with another guy who's UCLA. He was telling me about his friends that they go to Stanford or whatever. He's from the Bay Area. He's got friends who go to Stanford. They're going through a 4-year computer science degree, and tuition's insane now.
Yeah.
It's like $80,000, $90,000 a year. So they're out, let's say, close to $400,000. And what I hear is they graduate and they're having difficulty finding a job,
right?
Because they are junior.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think AI has really caused a bunch of turbulence in the labor market, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, coding is one of those tasks where AI is ripe to disrupt because it's one of the few sort of domains where you can get feedback in real time about your correctness. So that's why LLMs are so good at coding. It's because when they generate bad code, they can get feedback immediately if it's working or not, right? If it doesn't compile, that means that it generated bad code. So in other situations, it's a bit hard to provide that positive reinforcement to the LLM, but in coding, it's perfect. I think what that means is that if let's say you're at a university and you're trying to design the computer science program, and you're really worried about your graduates' job prospects, you have to kind of teach them in an AI native way. You have to teach them how to go beyond AI.
Wow.
So that they are not at the mercy of these coding assistants, but they're actually able to maximize and leverage it. Because if you teach them how to think the right way, they should become actually better software engineers.
So that's actually kind of one thing that I was curious about is the advice that you would give to somebody who's okay, let's kind of break it down several different levels, okay? One is, let's say, you just graduated, or you're a junior developer now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're out of code school. Another level is you're like first or second year, or third year of a computer science degree.
Yeah.
And then one is before, like either high school or middle school or even younger. So like let's start with like the first top level.
Yeah.
So you're a junior engineer.
Yeah.
And you're living, and I think what you provide a really interesting perspective, because you are from a hiring manager's perspective.
Yeah.
You're the CTO of a startup.
Yeah.
So like, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, it's the toughest position to be in. I would say, I would start by, every single junior developer is working on side projects in their spare time, right? I would say that they should be using coding assistants all the time in their side projects.
And the one that you recommend is?
I would use Claude, and I would use the Cursor IDE with Claude. You can change the model within Claude and customize it, but I think Claude is the best when it comes to code generation.
Yeah, Claude Sonnet.
Yeah, I would use Claude Sonnet 3.5. I mean, Anthropic in general is doing a lot of really cool stuff. Their computer use API, I've played around with it a little bit, and it's quite interesting too. Because now you can automate the browser, you can automate the entire computer.
OpenAI recently released, said that they have the O1 now. And I think you can use it in Cursor, you just have to use your own API key.
The thing with O1 is that it is very powerful.
And by the way, O1 is like the latest model of, but there's O1 Pro, which you have to have a $200 subscription. Not many people do that.
Yeah. And O1 is what they call a reasoning model, which basically what they're doing is they are training the LLM to not only just generate text in response to a prompt, they're basically training it to conduct its own chains of thought and sort of simulate how a human would reason about a problem end to end, right? So I don't know this exactly, this is somewhat speculative, but the way that they trained O1 is they basically asked folks overseas to solve these somewhat difficult math problems that require step-by-step computations, and they had to write down those steps, and then the model was trained on that, right? And that's like, again, that's very speculative on my part. I don't know 100% accuracy, but you can kind of tell that the way that O1 is behaving when you give it a prompt is it's actually breaking it up into its own sub-steps, and then it's evaluating it step by step. And then what it also does is it tries to do this multiple times across different possible pathways, and then it compares, sort of at test time, which is the best pathway. So like a human would, it's exploring multiple possible solutions, and then it's comparing those possibilities to see which one is best, right? But it's still, at the end of the day, the same core technology, and it's using transformers to figure out what's the most likely possible solution to a given prompt, right? It's just building on top of that.
Right.
So you get really cool results. Like, for example, if you feed in like the New York Times like crossword mini puzzle to like ChatGPT, GPT-4, you're probably not going to get it solved all the time with like a 50% hit rate. But O1, it has a much higher chance. It almost always gets it right. So it can definitely do more complicated stuff, right? But I think in the context of coding, O1 is very slow, and it takes a long time, sometimes minutes, to get you back a response. And you don't really want that kind of slow feedback loop when you're coding. You want something that's a little bit lower latency, higher throughput. So you basically want to, in my opinion, I think having a copilot that can sort of like automate the drudgery of coding for you, right? That can generate, for example,
can you give an example?
Code. Yeah, so like when I use Cursor, for example, and I'm renaming a variable, I could hit refactor, and I could say rename all of these variables in this file, but sometimes it's not quite what I want. I want to rename it in certain cases and not in others. Or I want to rename it in this file but not in that file. Or I want to like not only rename a variable but also rename the comments that use that variable.
Yep.
And Cursor's just very, very smart about that. It's so good at saying, oh, you made this change here. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all for you guys?
Yes, that's it.
Yes, thank you.
So Cursor is very good at saying like, oh, you made this change here, let me make this change here for you too. Let me figure out all the other places in the file where you're supposed to propagate this change, right? And so that saves me tons of time, And to this point, like now I don't even use the refactor function in my IDE. I just let Cursor do it for me. And that's why I think it's so powerful, because what that does is it frees you up, it frees up the developer's time to think about other issues that are more big picture, that are really hard for the LLM to understand, right? Because the LLM still doesn't know what you want to do. It just knows, it's watching what you're doing and saying, if you're doing this, let me help you. But you have to give it the initial direction. You have to figure out what you want. And that's why I think that's a really hard skill to develop, but you need to develop it if you want to differentiate yourself in the market these days.
I think that's so recently I started.
Oh, sorry, I'm just a little hungry.
Yeah, no, let's take turns eating.
It's a good idea.
I remember, so I started getting into like Cursor and I first used Cursor and Netlify, and then I used Sonnet 3.5 to code. And then what I realized was with Netlify, you couldn't do like, I guess, more complex apps. I don't know. I don't really know. This is one of the challenges of not having a coding background, but I can still make apps. And then someone showed me how you can connect Cursor with Replit. So I started using that.
Oh, nice.
And so that works pretty well. But I think I found myself kind of in two modes. One mode was what you said, like kind of I'm in coding mode, and I can almost it's like driving Tesla's full self-driving. It's like I'm on an autopilot.
Right.
And so I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. This is what you want to do? Here's the code, blah, 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 blah. Accept. Okay. And then I check the code, it doesn't work. I'm like, hey, this is what happened. Oh, sorry about that. And it fixes. And so it's kind of an autopilot. I don't really know what it's doing, but I'm just accept, copy and paste, accept, copy, error, accept, and eventually it works. The problem is, if I'm like 20 of these accepts in, and then it completely breaks, I don't know what happened. Like, because I was on autopilot the entire time.
Right.
So then I have to undo everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, I tried a new way, which is much more time consuming. But basically, I'm like, wait, hold on. Don't give me code. Just talk with me. Talk with me like a tech lead, like a brainstorming step. Yeah. So I'd say, don't give me code, just brainstorm with me. And then we kind of figure out the different options, and then we choose an option, and I say, now code, and then it codes.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait. Explain to me what each section of the code is doing.
Right.
So now I'm understanding how the code is working. And then I'm like, apply it. And the reason I find that beneficial is that later on when something breaks, I know which area to look into.
Yes.
And so it's interesting where someone said, when I explained this to them, they said, you're learning how to program. But it's almost like backwards, because I feel like the classical way of learning programming is you kind of learn how to code, and then eventually work on projects.
Right. Yeah, so I think what you're describing is sort of this like experiential learning, where the AI is kind of your tutor, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that actually, I think, is a powerful way to learn, because the classical way of teaching stuff is kind of like, read this book, like look at these notes,
so boring.
These lectures, and then go code. Now that I think it's not a bad paradigm. It does work, and there are benefits to it, but I think there is something very powerful also about the experiential approach, where you can see the feedback in real time, and you can immediately start to course correct, right? Where I think it's a bit problematic is that what ends up happening is that you only learn the principles you need to get to where you want to go. And so it becomes very almost like transactional. It's very utility driven, how you're learning. Whereas I think the old classic paradigm, which I still think has some benefit, is you're learning these fundamental principles, and when you do that, you can learn how they can generalize to different contexts. And so that I think you need both ultimately.
Yeah.
I think what our current education system is very good at is the former, and you also want the latter, and you want to combine both ideally. Because the latter is how you actually build things in the real world, right? I think, when I took computer science classes in school, the lectures were great, but I always learned more from the assignments. And I learned, I think, also the skills of like how to persevere and how to debug and like how to it takes a lot of patience to sift through hundreds of lines of code and figure out what the fuck is going on. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
The point I'm trying to make is that like these are personality traits, character traits that you have to also develop. And that's actually the part that I kind of worry about. I sort of worry that if you treat the AI as a shortcut, you will never develop that discipline, that ethic that you need to become a really powerful software engineer.
I think that's true for people who create code for like throwaway projects, but I think I've seen a lot of tutorials of like how to code with AI.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them, and I found the same thing myself, is you very rarely get it on the first prompt. What happens is you do it, error. Copy and paste that error. You have to do this like 50 times.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'll get to a working app. But what people see is a working app. They're like, wow, AI, they did it in one shot. And they're like, dude, I spent the past hour, I had no idea what the heck was going on. And I had to fix it.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I recommend is, before you just accept the solution from the AI, read through it end to end and see if you can verify for yourself.
Yes.
That's a good practice for just developing that intuition, developing that sense of correctness that you need to have on your own eventually, right? So I recommend this to everyone. Like when you're using the AI coding assistant, whenever it gives you a solution, read through it, try to understand it, try to verify it yourself, and then make tweaks, make edits, run it, see what happens, and you can give it that feedback. And once you're able to give it feedback but without running, and you know ahead of time, oh, this is broken, that's when you've really reached a new level, in my opinion.
I mean, what you're essentially saying is like, that skill can be generalized to a broader scale, like even news. Like if you just accept things, but what you're saying, don't just accept it.
Yeah.
Use critical thinking to come up with your own opinion, whether it's with code, whether it's with news, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to do. Like it's very tempting to just accept things that are coming out of the AI and just assume that it's correct, right? Because it is like it's pretty damn good, you know. Like it's not like you can make a strong argument that it's not a time-effective approach to verify everything, but I think in the long run, you will learn something and you'll become more independent and you'll be able to figure out what you should do that the AI can't do. And that to me is what ends up, like, that ultimately will lead to the best societal outcome, right? Where we have AI that supercharges us, that lets us maximize our leverage in society and that maximizes our productivity and our output, instead of us just being passive consumers of AI. Because that's likely to happen, unfortunately. Like you can imagine a world kind of like WALL-E, where everyone's just sitting and watching their AI-generated content. But I hope that's not the case. I hope instead we have a lot of people that are creating things with AI, and it's making them and empowering them to be better creators and better contributors to society.
I mean, I think that's one of the things. Like, at some point, I wanted to create like a learning platform or like some platform.
Very good bread.
But one of the like core principles that I had, if I were to create this, is it kind of sounds like a philosophical thing, but it's in line with what you're saying. Is I believe that AI should always be coupled with human reasoning. And so what I mean by that is, like, I would not create a platform where you press a button and just makes everything for you. Right. I would instruct the AI to almost like serve as a, like to challenge a person's ideas. It's like, oh, this is what you want. Tell me why you want this. Have you thought about different ideas, whatever? Because I think that AI at the brainstorming phase, for it to sharpen you, I think it's an amazing sharpener. And it can challenge you.
It really helps you go deep on a topic very quickly.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly, I guess I never answered your original question. Like, what advice would you give to a fresh grad, a college student, a high school student?
That's okay. These side roads are fun too.
I mean, I think my advice actually applies to all three levels.
Huh?
You know, in all cases, you should try to develop your own intuition, your own critical thinking, no matter what. And I would say that the sooner you do this, the better. I would also say that if you're, let's say, a high school student and you have more time on your hands, I would try to dig into the guts of how these LLMs work and how they're behaving and why they might make mistakes. Because if you understand the nuts and bolts of it, if you understand how they work and how they're trained, you will anticipate when they make mistakes. You'll understand, if I ask a question to the LLM that's based off of this, it's not going to get it right because it was trained back in March and this happened in November, for example. So, like, you want to, I think, start to develop a core understanding of how these things work behind the scenes, because then you'll be able to identify when it's broken or when it's likely to break. And ideally, in the future, you'll build a better solution and you'll be able to, again, contribute back to society. So just because these things are really powerful doesn't mean that you should just kick back and relax, right? Like, hopefully, with the new advancements in AI, it gives us as humans the opportunity to create new knowledge that the AI never would have thought of before, right? Because, there's been this whole discussion around, like, are we reaching artificial general intelligence?
Yeah.
And I would argue no, because I don't think that these AI agents or these AI tools are really creating new knowledge. I think they are interpolating between existing knowledge and giving you, like, the ability to sort of, like, retrieve that knowledge on demand very, very efficiently, right? Because, they're being trained on the entire internet, essentially, and so they're kind of compressing the internet down to its essence and giving you the ability to retrieve random tidbits super fast. But if you have new knowledge, then that's not going to show up in the LLM. And I think that's where we want to get to, is that humans should always be at the forefront of producing new knowledge, ideally. Does that make sense?
But as models get better, I mean, like, I remember I used to hear that LLMs, what should humans lean into? What should AI lean into?
No.
AI is the automatic, tedious, like Kai Fu Lee. AI just kind of like 2x2 that says, like, tedious, no emotions, just pure improvement, AI is going to take those jobs. Anything that needs human emotions or creativity, humans will do that. So I thought creativity, LLMs are not good at it. But come to find out, they may not be theoretically good at it, but practically, they're quite good. It's like, I want you to come up with like some crazy ideas for a landing page or whatever. And with prompting, it can come up with some pretty creative, crazy things. Now, philosophically, it might not be creative, it's just remixing ideas. But practically speaking, I don't care. These are creative to me, and I can use this. So is it important that there's a difference?
Well, I would say this. Creativity is in the eye of the beholder. I think that's a point that you're sort of hinting at. Because what's new to you might not be new to me. I would say that when something is truly unique and no one in the world has seen it before, but it's really, really powerful and it's really, really compelling. And I think it's hard to say, like, I'll put it this way. When the Mona Lisa was first presented to society, everyone was amazed by it because they'd never seen anything like it before, right? When Michelangelo's David was presented to society, same thing, right? Now, if I see a sculpture today that reminds me of Michelangelo's David, or a painting that reminds me of the Mona Lisa, yeah, I'm not going to be that impressed by it, right? But there is something unique about the first person doing that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is a future Michelangelo or a future Da Vinci that's going to paint that future Mona Lisa or build that future statue of David. And when that happens, I think we'll all know, yeah, there's no way that an AI could do that, right? But unfortunately, that means that the average everyday painter has a really, really high bar to meet now, right? Because it used to be the case that painters were a pretty common occupation when we had no cameras. Then the camera came along and replaced painting. Now you can make an argument that, like, we don't really need to take photographs anymore. I can just generate photographs. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that when we go back to these old mediums, it has to be done in such a creative way that it truly stands out, so that anyone who sees it would say, yes, this is definitely a creative, human-led endeavor, and it wasn't led by AI.
And do you think the vast majority, in the future, the vast majority of those people are going to be people, maybe 90, 95%, will be people, artists who leverage AI as like an assistant, as a research assistant, as a brainstormer, whatever.
Yeah, I think everyone will use AI to a certain extent to brainstorm and to refine and fine-tune their ideas. But I think at the end of the day, what I hope is that everyone adapts to this new landscape and realizes that they have to invest in developing those creative skills early on so that they can differentiate themselves. Because AI will free up our time to consume and appreciate that new creativity, that new media. And it's really up to us to decide what we think is valuable, and it's also up to us to decide where we spend our time. So I would say that like, not all hope is lost. We could end up in a situation where everyone's like Wall-E, we're all sitting here watching content. But if people realize what their true potential is, then I think we might end up in a much better spot where actually everyone is creating and contributing. But I don't know, I'm just being very optimistic.
Well, yeah.
I could be totally wrong.
I mean, I think some of the things that I do while I'm in Korea is I talk to parents. One thing about Korea is, like, news travels very fast. I think there's a variety of reasons for it. Homogenous society, they all speak the same language, very small country concentrated in Seoul. So word travels very fast. And parents see ChatGPT, they see AI, they don't understand it, but they're like, shoot, how do I prepare my kids for it? Because Korea is a society where parents invest an enormous amount in education because they want to prepare their kids for the future. That's the thought. Because their thought is great education, great college, great company, you're safe. That's what they think, right? So there's a huge hunger of, like, parents saying, like, how do we prepare our kids for this? The Department of Education is also thinking through, like, how do we incorporate AI? Like, and so, like, just your opinion, Firas's opinion, what would you, like, lean in? Like, I have a third grader and a seventh grader.
Yeah.
What would you lean into them if you could be like, hey, these subjects, I don't think they're going to be as important in the future, these subjects you should really, really lean into. Or these, it doesn't even have to be a subject. It could be like, do projects. Or just what advice would you give? Just Firas, Uncle Firas.
Yeah. Boy, I didn't think I'd be an uncle so early in my life. I would say, I guess I would start with this. You know, in the old days, economic stability, you could find economic stability by finding a really good job at a really good company, right? And in the United States, you know, it was going to Ford, General Motors, it was going to one of these...
IBM.
You know, exactly, IBM is a good example. Like, back in the halcyon days of the 50s and 60s, like these mega corporations. And in Korea, it's like Samsung, for example, right? My suspicion is that with AI, you don't need these mega corporations anymore.
Ooh.
You don't need like 10,000 people in a single company working towards a single goal, a single OKR, right? I think in the limit, you can imagine a world in which everyone is kind of their own corporation.
Tell you what?
You can imagine a world in which everyone is their own corporation. And the things that you're trying to get done, you just use AI agents for. But that's in the limit. I don't think it's going to be like every person necessarily.
Can you like give an example?
Like, okay, if I was starting an accounting firm today, I wouldn't have to hire a bunch of accountants. I would instead employ a bunch of AI agents to do things for me, right? Like, if software is getting more and more powerful, and AI agents can take actions on my behalf and take care of tasks that I normally would ask a human to do, why would I hire humans?
And I think literally that example you gave is not happening like in the future, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
There was a company called Basis that just said they use agents for accounting.
Yes, exactly. And so, I think the speed of the transition is the scariest part, because I think what's going to happen if we don't adjust to this very quickly is everyone's going to be out of a job. Because it's hard to adjust to this new society, this new landscape super fast. But let's assume that we can make that transition. Well, what does it look like after that? Because that's kind of how I think of it, right? Like, this is inevitable to a certain extent.
You think it's inevitable?
The inertia of technology and AI is so strong that you can't really stop it.
There are some people who are like, I don't like AI, it's moving too fast. Your opinion is...
Well, but the economic incentives are too strong. Like, you can't...
The companies are not going to be like, I'm not going to use AI because I'm scared, when I know for a fact I can make more money using AI.
Exactly. Like because of the nature of capitalism, no one's going to stop. So if you accept that as a premise, and listen, if you don't accept that, then maybe we should talk about capitalism and whether it's the right system to live under. But I don't know if I could go that far. But let's assume that this transition is going to happen. So what does it look like on the other side of that? What it looks like is, hey, back office work is done for you. Remote tasks are done for you. You, Sam, or me, Firas, we're tasked now with finding some way to provide value to society that's very unique to me. That taps into my unique skill set, my idiosyncrasies, right? And to be honest, I think we've already been thinking like this for a while. Like, if you talk to folks who go to college starting in, I think, like the late 2000s, every single commencement address is like, oh, go find your passion. Go find what you truly love and you're truly good at, right? Well, what is like the philosophy that's undergirding all of that? It's whatever you love the most, that's what you'll be best at. And if you're the best at that, then you will contribute the most to society. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, AI doesn't change that, it makes that even more so. So what ends up happening then is, you don't need to hire a bunch of people to do the manual labor that your vision required. You have AI agents, so what you should be spending your time on is refining and perfecting your vision.
Wow.
What you want to do. Or perfecting like what's going to make you unique in the world and what makes you special. And with the power of AI, it should be fully realizable, right? And that's where I say, like, in the limit, you could see a world in which every individual is their own small business, is their own corporation.
Wow. Then in that world, does that mean there's a lot more entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that means that you have to develop skills for entrepreneurship and how to think about, negotiation and pricing and people skills and all the other things that are kind of the hidden factors that make a successful entrepreneur successful. It's not just having a good degree. It's not just having a good network. It's being able to, intuitively identify, oh, this is a good opportunity for me. I'm going to take this, right? Here's where I can partner with someone because they're a potential ally and we have the same goals, the same incentives. AI can't do that for you. AI cannot help you understand humans. You have to talk to other humans to understand humans. So that's why I think there will always be a place for humans in society, because at some point you're going to have to collaborate, but it's not going to be this collaboration where I hire a bunch of people to do my job for me. It's you and I have aligned goals. We're two independent people with our own set of incentives, but here's where our incentives align. Let's make it happen.
It's really interesting because,
and I could be totally wrong. Like I'm not. This is very speculative on my part, but
I can hear some of these viewers say, for us, that's easy for you to say. You went to, by the way, what schools did you go to? Stanford PhD in machine learning. I know that, right? Okay. Before, I wasn't sure if it was Harvard or MIT.
Well, so it was Stanford undergrad and master's, and then I went to MIT to start my PhD, and then I transferred back to Stanford to continue it.
Okay, so it was Stanford and MIT.
Basically, Stanford, MIT, back to Stanford.
Okay. So they'll look at this and be like, it's easy for you to say for us because you have a good degree. Sure. I have a degree from nowhere, or I don't even have a degree. Like, it looks like only people like you are going to be successful in this, post-AI world. Yeah. I don't think that's true, but I'd like to know, like, how would you respond to that? Like, the opportunities are only for those who have good degrees from good schools and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I'm not so sure that the power of the university system is going to be around for decades to come. Like, I think there is a world in which universities not only survive but thrive. But like the cost of tuition is going up and up and up. The economic argument to go to a four-year college isn't nearly as strong as it used to be. There's a reason why Peter Teal started the Teal Fellowship, and I'm not the biggest Peter Teal fan, but...
By the way, can you just briefly explain what is the Teal Fellowship?
Yeah, so basically the Teal Fellowship was a program that Peter Teal started. He would find 20 high school students who usually were like exceptionally bright, very, very smart, and he would give them, I think it was either $50,000 or $100,000 to skip college and instead work on a startup idea of their own. And they could work on it for, I think, up to 2 years. And I've met former Teal fellows. Some of them were very successful. A lot of them ended up going to college later.
And like one famous person who came out of the fellowship was the guy who created Ethereum.
Yes. Yeah. And I had a friend at Stanford who did a Teal Fellowship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now she has a startup that focuses on in vitro fertilization and essentially like doing like screening for genetic traits that might end up causing you, like that might cause like the child to have serious birth defects later, and screening for those embryos ahead of time, and it's essentially selecting the ones that are most likely to have a healthy life.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very cool. Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name right now. I'll think of it later, and you can leave it in the comments.
Yep.
I'm so sorry, Nora. But anyways, the long and short of it is that like the Teal Fellowship was addressing a market inefficiency, which is these universities have become overpriced, right? Now, why are these universities expensive? Well, they can argue that it's because of staffing. They can argue because it's they're providing all these resources to the students that they didn't have to do in the past. Like, I think at the end of the day, they aren't doing it because they have to. They're doing it because they can, because they think that the demand is very, very high, and they're keeping the supply constrained because they have an incentive to do so, right? If they keep the acceptance rate very, very low, that makes them look more elite, and if they're very, very elite, then they get more applications. So the economics of it are leading in that direction, but at some point it's going to collapse. At some point they have to accept more kids, right? And so I would argue that these universities now aren't necessarily doing the work of educating our best and brightest. They're doing the work of certifying our best and brightest. But that certification doesn't have to come from a university necessarily, as is evidenced by Peter Teal, right? And another big benefit of the university system is that they give you all these networks to tap into, right? You come to this university and you can meet other like-minded folks who are also equally brilliant, and you can collaborate with them and do that sort of thing. But in the age of the internet, you don't need that either. You really don't. Like it's very helpful to be in person, but it's not that difficult to find your own networks that unlock your potential, so to speak. So I think universities have to adapt in this new age of AI. I think they really have to understand what is their value add. They have to understand that creativity is going to be the premium in the future, and they have to start to cultivate that. But that has to happen K through 12 as well. It's not just the university's responsibility. So I would argue that yes, like I'm very lucky that I got degrees from really awesome schools, and I met really awesome people, and I've had a very blessed life. No question about it. But I think AI actually levels the playing field even more than before. That's my personal belief. Yeah. As long as it's accessible to everyone. Now, if you start to gatekeep these AI agents or these AI models, and only the elites can use them, then yes, we're going to look at like a very tiered society, potentially. But it's definitely possible.
But do you see that? I think to your point, the direction that currently is going is like there was some gatekeeping, like there's OpenAI, here's our model, to use it you have to. But even that is like quite affordable. It's only like $20 a month.
Right. And also, there's a free alternative, which is all the open source models from
Exactly. I think that's like what I was kind of surprised. Like Facebook made a big bet with Llama, saying like we're going to do open source, and it actually benefits them financially because the community is making Llama better, and Facebook uses Llama for their services. So great. But then I think like that's what was interesting to see is that as AI models get better, the open source community just keeps getting better and better. Right. Like yesterday, they announced like the physics. I forget what it's called, but Genesis. I think Project Genesis, where it models like 4D physics and stuff, and people can use it. It's just open source. And so it seems like there is a check and balances where it's like, it seems the direction is that it will be available to all who care enough to learn about it.
I think that the open source community is why I have some optimism here. Now, at some point, these companies will take what's open source and they'll close source it. Because that's what they do, because they got to make money, right? But that open source contribution that they made is still so valuable, and someone can come and take that and run with it and build something brand new that's also equally powerful too. So the cat's kind of already out of the bag, so to speak.
So that's like super interesting because like in Korea, there's so much competition for so few jobs that it's like the filtering starts with what school you went to.
Right.
But in the future world, I mean, I think a big part of entrepreneurship is, I don't even think it's a skill. I don't even think it's the execution. I think it's the first step in saying I want to take a step towards entrepreneurship. I feel like for me, that has been the hardest step. Like just psychologically accepting the fact that I'm not going to have a 9 to 5. I might not have money, and that could freak you out, or you could be totally okay with it. Yeah. The younger you are, if you're living with your parents, you don't really care about it. But if you are the sole breadwinner of a family of 4, then it could be scarier for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what makes people successful is not just their intelligence, right? There are certain character traits that increase your upside, I'll put it that way. So it might necessarily guarantee success, but it gives you higher odds of success, right? I think one of them is just work ethic, like how hard you work. You know, if you work harder than the person next to you, the chances of you succeeding are higher because you're giving yourself more bites at the apple. That's basically how it works, right? If you're willing to put in 1 extra hour, that 1 extra hour every day will compound over time, and all of a sudden you are way ahead of everyone else. So your work ethic is a big one. I also think, especially in this day and age, risk-taking, your appetite for risk, is not in every industry, in every domain, but in a lot of domains, and I think it's going to increase over time. Your risk tolerance is a key determinant of your success. Because if you think about who is the most quote-unquote successful person in the world, who's the richest guy in the world, it's Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a very smart guy. I think he's also really crazy, but I think what sets him apart from every other human being is his appetite for risk.
Yeah.
Like by far, by far. Because if you read his bio, if you look at his story, what you'll notice is that time and time again, he goes all in on whatever he believes in. Whether it's Tesla, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Neuralink, whether it's boring company, and not everything succeeds. And he gets very, very close to failure, or he does end up failing in some situations. But the reason why he's made so much money is because he went all in and he won the pot. And there are very few people who have the risk tolerance to go all in. The next time you play poker, try going all in on your first hand. You probably won't do it because you're too scared to do so.
Right.
That's a very normal reaction. Elon Musk, for whatever reason, does not have that problem. His genetics are different. He's wired differently. And by the way, actually, from what I've read, when he plays poker, that's exactly how he plays. Yeah.
Just all in.
It's how he lives his life. Yeah. And again, I don't think he's necessarily the smartest guy. I think when he veers into other topics besides rocket building and self-driving cars or electric vehicles, he tends to be kind of off base. But I think the risk-taking sets him apart, and I think we can learn from that, to be honest with you. Right?
And I think on the rocket making thing, even that, from the beginning, he didn't know a ton about rockets. I mean, he did study physics, but he basically found the smartest people and said, I want to learn. And from what I understand, he learns pretty quickly. And he's just he's a voracious reader. He's just voracious learner, I guess.
No.
So it's almost your ability. So you said risk appetite. I forgot the first one that you said.
So I said work ethic.
Work ethic, risk appetite.
And I think the last one that I'll say is, you can call it fear of embarrassment. So Elon Musk is not afraid to dive into a new topic and embarrass himself.
Yeah.
Right? Or another way you could frame this is shamelessness. I'm not afraid to do something that might bring me shame because I know in the long run it's good for me.
Yeah.
Right? Now, shamelessness I think is probably not the best way to characterize it because that ends up leading to some really bad behaviors. But I think fear of embarrassment or fear of intimidation, maybe is a more broad way to put it, is not good for you because you will end up avoiding things that you probably should not have avoided, right? And that type 1 error is much worse than the type 2 error of, I tried something that I'm not
Type 1, type 2, can you explain that?
Well, actually, I'm mixing them up most likely, but one is false positive, the other one's false negative. I always mix the two up, but essentially, it's better to try and fail than to not try and wonder if you would have succeeded or not.
Yeah, it's that whole Michael Jordan quote.
Yeah.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
It's actually Wayne Gretzky, but Well, it's actually
Fake news.
Michael Scott quoted
Scott.
Wayne Gretzky,
Michael Scott, if you don't know who Michael Scott is, watch The Office. It's basically a documentary about America corporate life.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it a mockumentary anymore. I would call it a documentary. It's very accurate. No one gets work done in an office.
Sorry.
Hey, by the way, it's 1:35.
Oh.
I want to make sure that you're good with time.
Yeah, actually, I think I probably have to run because I have to meet Ibrahim, actually. He's in LA. Too.
He's in LA?
Just briefly. Yeah.
Okay.
Not full time.
Yeah.
Well, it's not yet.
Okay, well, sounds good. I had no idea we were going to talk about this stuff, but hey, this is how these things go. I just talk about whatever I think is fun.
Well, Sam, I'm really sorry. You didn't finish your food.
Oh, dude. No, I was just about to say sorry for you because you didn't finish your food.
That's okay.
Anyway, dude, for us, it was awesome talking with you about this, and I think the topics that you talk about will be super, super interesting to especially people in Korea, because a lot of what you said is actually almost the opposite of Korean culture, where they want to, coming as a country that's a survivor, they're being attacked by Japan, China, historically, they just have a survivor mentality, and they're don't stick out. Go where everyone else is going, go the safe route. And what you're saying is this AI thing is not a passing fad. It's something that's fundamentally going to shift the world. And
you have to embrace your individualism to a certain extent.
Yeah, embrace the individualism. Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I think, Korean culture and East Asian cultures in generally, actually, any culture that's not Western, is much more collectivist than it is individualistic. And I think that's actually kind of a good thing.
Yeah, there's a beauty in that too.
Yeah. And I'm not saying get rid of that.
Yeah.
I think that's very important just for the health of the overall society. And in particular, the mental health of each individual, right? Because I think a lot of Koreans, based on my limited knowledge, there's concern about isolation. There's concern about just feeling lonely all the time, right? The Korean birth rate is very, very low from what I've heard, and a lot of people live by themselves.
Lowest in the world, yes.
Yeah. That's actually, it's not just a Korean problem. I think it's a worldwide problem.
Yeah.
I want to be clear. And so that collectivist attitude, I think, helps keep the bond of society strong.
Yes.
So I'm not against that whatsoever. But I think in terms of what you're going to contribute to society from an economic perspective, you have to tap into your individual strengths.
And I think what you're saying is like, it's not it's an either or. It's an and.
It's a yes and.
Yeah, you can take shades of things that, like, if it's a tool set, if America has a list of tools and Korea has a list of tools, you can grab the right tool that's best for your use case.
Yeah.
And I think like the same thing, like when I was learning about Korean collectivist culture, I think there's a beauty in it. And there's also a utility part in it. It's like, hey, if we need all society to like do certain things that will keep us safe, they tend to do it, right? Whether it's to put on masks, which is controversial, but anyway. But also that can be taken to the extreme where there are people who are innovators, they want to go off and break off on their own thing, but they're scared or they're afraid how their parents are going to judge them, how their friends are going to judge them, etc.
Yeah. No, I mean like every culture operates a certain way for a reason, right? There's a long history. I think you outlined it beautifully. And I think it's just valuable to understand the history, understand why things are the way they are, and you're not necessarily trying to change that, but I think you want to adapt and try to cover the spectrum a little bit.
I love it. With that, dude, love it. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.
We gotta have a part 2, but I want to actually hear about the entrepreneurial story, but that's part 2.
Sorry.
No. This is awesome. Thanks. Peace.